good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this fast forward planet, which is still locked in a pandemic. Doesn't feel that way for many of us now. And more could come depending on what happens with the interface between humans and biological activity and frontiers. It's a planet that's still riven by turbulence related to Putin's war in Ukraine. It's a human heated planet, which is driving species and humans into new relationships with their surroundings. And that's going to be intensifying going forward. There's an infodemic, depending on how you want to characterize the polluted media environment, where the ways we communicate are also kind of frazzled and turbulent. And that's why I love to talk with folks who are trying to cut through for impact, conserving biological diversity, slowing global warming, building more resilient communities. This is Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School Sustain What webcast. And I'm here today with Topher White, who's been a brilliant innovator using existing and new technology in forest regions, particularly to try to foster resilience, awareness, responsiveness when bad things are happening. And he's got some new tools emerging as well. We're going to learn about them. Topher White, good to be with you from California. I'm here in rural Maine on the coast of the Skillings River in Wabanaki territory. And so what are you up to these days?
Oh, wow. Okay. First, it's a bummer where you are. That's amazing. That's amazing up in Maine. I'm in San Francisco. And up to these days, well, it's amazing to look back for the start, like almost like 10 years ago. I have to give you some props because I think you really helped us get the word out around our first project about 10 years ago. Something called Rainforest Connection, which was largely focused on how do we use real-time data, but in this case, data coming from sound to track destructive activity in the rainforest. That was kind of where we began many years ago.
Right.
We've been working on that for quite a few years. And of course, it intersects a lot with the subjects you brought up over the last few minutes. So yeah, I mean, been up to trying to deal with a lot of the issues you brought to the surface there and how they affect our changing work.
And what got you going in this? Tell us a little bit about your backstory. You're obviously a smart guy, engineering skills. What focused you on sustainability and on connectivity and this kind of stuff?
Well, my background is much more in like physics and engineering, mostly software engineering. And I had wanted to work. I was actually working at a nuclear fusion laboratory called ITER in France in about 2012 or so. Yeah. Largely because I wanted to work in climate tech at the time. And but then I took a trip out to Indonesia to volunteer at a Gibbon Reserve, really just for a couple of weeks, and realized that they had this one issue that even a fairly small part of their forest, where maybe 300, 400 hectares, was kind of plagued constantly by illegal logging. They weren't able to get there in time to stop it because it was big enough that they couldn't quite catch it. And I figured this was one of those things that we could address. I did have this kind of idea in my mind at the time which we can all relate to now. That was back in 2012 or 2011, actually, sorry, where we'd already were throwing away cell phones like over and over and over again, and they were marketing like other Internet of Things devices, and I was like, that's pretty silly. These are amazing little internet computers with sensors, and so I had this idea that I wanted to use phones to as sensor devices, and that became a great way to apply it. All things considered, putting stuff in the rainforest is much harder than I would have expected, and so I came face to face with general hubris around what was going to be hard or not along the way.
Yeah, but it was great that you, a lot of people would go to a Gibbon Reserve or something and just take some pictures and go home.
Yeah. Well, see, it's funny you mentioned that because again, gibbons are incredibly cute. They probably are one of my the inspiration for a lot of what I do, but it's really the sound that you can't get away from. In fact, going back to Indonesia over and over again, it's very rare to actually see one, but you hear them constantly, and it's the most inspiring, most wonderful sound I think on the planet. And so I did have that kind of I think that was a seed in my mind that sound could be a great way to do what we do.
Yeah, and around that time, sound. I remember writing at the time in the New York Times about elephants, tracking forest elephants. Folks at Cornell were using sound and triangulation to try to get a sense of the elephant dynamics, and also poaching because the gunshots obviously can be registered. That was, God, probably 15 years ago. before GPS was really a cheap normal thing, before real-time connections made that a surveillance technology. I mean, the military was doing this with sniper to identify sniper locations, but
With sound, you mean?
yeah, with sound,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, it's funny you mentioned elephants. Oh, and even also Cornell Elephant Listening Project, because yeah, elephants are a great example, just like gibbons, where they live in the forest. You can't see 50 feet in front of you, but sound really travels, and so you have these elephants that are able to communicate over like multiple kilometers just through infrasound. So if you want to know the best way to know what's happening on the other side of a forest, like just do what the animals are doing when it comes to what gets out there. But again, back to my sort of original hubris, I was like, oh, we'll be able to detect chainsaws. We'll be able to keep this thing solar powered. Spent about 6 or 8 months just trying to get solar power cracked at the beginning in a like a dark forest, and we're still trying to improve it. But how do we actually detect chainsaws? I remember sort of rolling up to Cornell, and walking in there in the morning, not really knowing who, and asking if they could help me figure out how to detect chainsaws. And true to their word, Peter Reg, Elephant Listening Project, Dr. Yushu, they were just like, yeah, sure, we'll show you how. If it weren't for them, the project wouldn't happen. So
yeah, Cornell's been pretty amazing at this stuff. And so how many how's that worked out? That's Rainforest Connection?
Yeah, Rainforest Connection. Again, we started with threat detection primarily. That's been spread to 34 countries now. Lots of projects, primarily with indigenous groups and local NGOs, and in some cases, some local governments. But then over time, of course, detecting it and keeping it going is even the easy part, as hard as that is. It's then how do you get to people to respond in a way that's safe and reliable. And that's, of course, where a lot of our work is coming with the partnerships and software to incentivize and organize. And really, there's no way to shortcut that. But even in situations where we are able to help protect the place with local people, the only way to know this is to continually be streaming audio out of the place. That audio, of course, is extremely high value for scientific analysis of what's there. And so over the past few years, we've been really focusing especially on bioacoustics and ecoacoustics, and how can we use the sound of our planet to study and protect it as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's multiple reasons too. And that issue you got at in terms of building the relationships and capacities is a very distinct thing from just having the widget.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually love to hear your experiences on this too. After all these years, I don't know if there's any such thing as a top-down conservation solution. It's all extremely local. And the only real local conservation solutions are the people who are going to be there generation after generation, really feel like there's value in keeping the forest the way it is. But one of the great ways to have them know that and feel that is to see that the rest of us care about it too, through collaboration. So is our tool the difference maker? We certainly feel that it is in a lot of places, but just as much so is the collaboration and work with them. And not always financially.
Yeah. No, this making a technology, especially for indigenous communities or local stakeholders like local agrarian communities who are interested in conserving their land, or rubber tappers in the Amazon who are not indigenous but have been there for generations. If they're not trusting you, if it doesn't fit what they're trying to accomplish, it just will rust away. If it's rustable, or just it'll wear out.
Well, the forest deconstructs all things too. That's true.
I was really encouraged when I saw the film The Territory, because it showed one lens literally on it was an Indian tribe in Rondonia in the Amazon, for whom technology has really become a differential. They're able to do GPS imagery, photography, video, and then have a geotag so they can take that to court or to the government. And this is after a lot of abuse and invasions and stuff. None of that just goes away magically, but I don't know if you've seen that or just seen other examples for you that are great case studies and how that can work out.
Yeah, no, the Territory is a great example of that, and also speaks to how we don't necessarily give indigenous people always like the credit for being as technologically advanced or technologically like open as they often are. And they're going to have different ideas about how to use it. So you don't show up to instruct, you show up to demonstrate, and then they'll come up with all these great ideas for how to apply it, especially because most people have smartphones everywhere in the world anyway, whether they're connected or not. And it's funny you mentioned like the court cases, because although there's definitely instances, especially in Peru, where our data and stuff coming out of our system have been used in court cases, but primarily we're operating in places where there doesn't seem to be any law and order at all. And so it is largely about drawing a line, keeping that line, using the instances that you can stop people to further a case, not further a case that people can't make it back in. And I don't need to bring up with you that like, a lot of these places are places of high ethnic conflict. There's plenty of reasons for people to feel like either side is privileged, and so but we have to recognize that usually there's a group who's more likely to protect the forest, which is of course our goal, and those are the ones that we would usually team up with.
Yeah. So you're up to something new now. You're taking some of this technology to people's backyards and the like. Tell us a little bit about this, and if you have anything you want to show.
Sure. Well, even Rainforest Connection and our tool Arbimon kind of shows a new focus for the whole organization there, about how we can use the sounds of the planet to understand it and measure changes in biodiversity and adaptation to climate change just using sound. So being able to track species on a large scale. It's really, really very exciting. Again, a lot of these places are, that's a platform that anyone can use for scientists or conservationists. One of the things that we wanted to work on, though, was something that would actually bring bioacoustics, or even the study of nature through sound, ostensibly through sound, or really through any sensors, to a wider audience. Like we all love dissident science tools that are out there. We all love the bona fide science tools that are there. But I do think there's a ceiling on the amount of involvement that you can get. And so what we wanted to do was build almost like a smart home for your backyard, understanding that we could build a tool that could work in the farthest reaches of the rainforest if we wanted, or on a buoy. But why not build something that we can take to anyone's backyard or their balcony or their rooftop and actually show them that there's a lot of biodiversity all around you, especially when you're inside, and then find new ways to get it to them. So we designed this thing here called the Delta. The devices we've been putting in the rainforest for the past few years are called Guardians. This takes those 10 years of learnings from putting things in these remote places and sort of pulls it into a device that we think is sort of novel in shape, but also has a lot of amazing tech built in. It primarily focuses on sound and other sensors like gas sensors for being able to smell what's happening, with a primary focus entirely on biodiversity. So if you were to put this in your backyard, we could tell you every animal that comes through that vocalizes, animals that other animals are vocalizing about, and map them within your space. And then over time, use that data layer to create all sorts of experiences for you. And of course, feed all that data back into a global database of biodiversity.
That's particularly valuable. That if you, again, I think in the Arctic, there was a researcher at Columbia and some others who were working on using sort of wide field, many different microphones across a wider area to track bird migrations. And of course, over time, you can get patterns and stuff. So the more data, the better, I assume. Is that right?
Definitely. Particularly because in sound, it's not targeted, right? It's true that not every moment of every day, unless you're in the deep rainforest, has some animal within it. But there's a lot of stuff that's in there that you might not be looking for that others can parse out. So I'm a big proponent of gathering high resolution, continuous, raw data, making it available to analysis for all sorts of people. And that's what both the platform and this tool is there to facilitate.
Is this similar to, I know there's growing utilization of webcams, or, people have sort of Nest cams, wildlife cams for video. Mm-hmm. Is this just taking it to a new level?
Totally. It's a similar idea that I guess you put something up in your backyard and capture animals coming through, except for the fact that cameras, while they're wonderful, cameras will capture what's like right here. And they'll only capture things that are big enough to see. And the cool thing about sound is that it's not any better than what you can see necessarily, but you can capture like a wide variety of things, like everything from the small frogs to the bumblebees to the things that are behind you. And because this is directional, we can actually map their location and track them as they go through, potentially even allowing us to turn a camera to the direction of a bird or other animals that might not be very well captured by like a wide lens camera. But we think sound is like sound is not the only way to capture animals, but it's like probably the most unexploited, I would say, in conservation and even just like kind of joy of connecting to nature. partially
Sure.
because of people's kind of perception of technical limitations that I think we've largely transcended, both with our past work and especially with this.
So, so how new is this? Is it
This is
literally?
totally new. This is
Okay.
totally new. We're launching it on Kickstarter. Actually, we're trying to take it to people. Kickstarter launches on the 11th of April, so anybody can get access to it. This has not been made available to anybody yet, but yeah, we hope that very soon there'll be bees in every backyard and everywhere out there. But I think a lot of it's also we're also trying some new things on top of this. So it's one thing to build a citizen science tool. It's one thing to say we can tell you when birds are there. It's one thing to be able to listen live to your backyard like a camera and detect these things automatically, which of course we can do. But we're kind of doubling down on this idea that we want to reach a new audience as well. So if you have this baseline of biodiversity, how can we use generative AI tools, all these tools that are available to now, to actually take nature and recreate it in a way that new people would be attracted to? So the arrival of a squirrel, the arrival of a blackbird, of a robin, all these things in your backyard are legitimately solid scientific data points, but those can be mapped together to recreate a version of nature with names of animals, relationships between them, relationships to you that allow you to look at them in a slightly different way. And so we are kind of doubling down on this idea that we can recreate stories with the real happenings in your backyard from moment to moment, day to day, and with that reach a wider audience in any genre, everything from bedtime stories for your kids to the noir mystery romance between the squirrel and the rabbit. That's what we're looking to see if it works.
You're reminding me of Birdcast, and some of these.
Yeah.
These are using data, I think, from reports of birds. As they migrate, you're starting to get this sort of dynamic. Again, it's crowdsourced radar. Also, I think weather radar is picking up bird motions and stuff. I love what you're talking about, to add the sonic element again, because you don't have to spot it. It's just something that's being listened to. So I assume your vision is something like this, to be able to have a sound map of.
So absolutely.
Click on robins or on other migratory birds or whatever.
So absolutely, I think that because of Arbimon, because of the other platforms that we'll feed into, you can get access to these on a very macro scale. But I think also we're really trying to focus on individual. I think we're trying to crowdsource in a non-citizen science way, citizen science or high-level science degree data. So in order to do this, not everything is going to be about a macro scale. We're actually going to focus a lot on the user experience of your backyard, of your neighborhood. So being able to zoom in and say, okay, what are the patterns of that particular group of coyotes that come through,
Sure.
Or like when do the owls come through, and try and get people to really appreciate what's just a few hundred meters from where they happen to be focused. And of course, that could be your campsite as well, if you want it to be.
Sure.
But, yeah.
I would surely love this in where we are in Maine.
Oh yeah,
and of course,
we'll definitely get one.
In Central Park, this is not just something confined to rural areas or suburban areas. There's a soundscape. I keep seeing people posting remarkable species diversities, particularly for birds in places like Central Park.
Oh yeah, there's lots there. I mean, instead of making this about like a single sensor as well, we're really trying to build like a hub for others. Again, sound is great because it allows us to have a spatial awareness of what's there. But because it's solar powered, because it's got the batteries, because it can create a Wi-Fi network and everything else can connect to it, we really see this being something that other sensors, other things people have can connect to. So it's about like an ecosystem of what's possible. But starting with sound, because sound you can open up a whole imagination with that, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So am I looking at, is that the solar panel there? Or?
Yeah. So we're trying out some new ideas on design. That's why there's a hole in the middle. The hole in the middle is for installation options. Plus, it's an expansion slot for new things. But everything is kind of magnetized to the point that you, instead of having to clip everything on, you just have these solar panels right there. The same is true for accessories, and you can sort of put it up and keep it powered. There's enough batteries that it can keep recharging every day.
Wow.
Even in the sun. It's really intended to be a rugged device, but one that you wouldn't mind having around.
Yeah. What will the cost be? Does that depend on the?
Yeah, $299 will be the cost of it, and then of course there's and that's pretty much the entire. That's got all the functionality that you'd want in there. Normally it doesn't work with cell phone or satellite, but you can also upgrade it internally to have like Swarm satellite or LoRaWAN or 4G service as well. But yeah,
Wait, you mean so it doesn't work with the Starlink?
it will. Well, it actually fits nicely over a Starlink mast, actually. So yeah, it'll connect to Starlink quite well with Wi-Fi.
Good. That's what we have.
Oh, cool. Hey, well, then there you go. We'll get it to you. We'll install it right there on the mast, and then sits right beneath the satellite.
That's pretty funny.
And
so what will will there be an interface online where people can
sure.
I assume there's an app or something where they can kind of track what's going on.
Yeah, there's an app called Squibbon. So this is called the Delta. The new project, the new sort of app is called Squibbon, which is a whole story in and of itself. But yes, there'll be an app called Squibbon that you can use to both get your alerts, see your entire history of sound, the events. Whenever there's a species that comes through, you'll be able to play that back, share your streams with other people. And that storytelling that I mentioned is a whole layer of a visual storytelling within the app based upon those same data points. And then of course that's available online. Yeah, there we go. Thanks.
Yeah, I just pulled up the website.
And what's great about this also is that, again, we are there to focus on that first level experience, but all the data, if you opt in, will be streamed into Arbimon, which is our, first class scientific analysis tool. So for anyone who wants to do scientific analysis, it's just a click away. And of course, we want to be sharing these insights with every organization who'd be interested in it as well. So we're trying to crowdsource, a lot more biodiversity data so we can see the changes as they occur, and at a very high resolution, right? Because I mean, no qualms with it, but I think there's a lot of sense that people don't want to collect too much data that they can't analyze, because this thing can collect continuously. You get that spatial awareness. We invented a whole new codec to be able to compress bioacoustic data to stream it up. So we can collect 192 kilohertz and stream it to the cloud on 4 different channels, so that we're able to track bats, of course, and all this high resolution. We'll save that so that we can go back and analyze it for things that you might not have looked for. And because it's continuous, there's no sampling. So we're trying to collect more data, not less.
But in a way that you can tune out the noise. Yes,
so that's important. So it's one thing to listen to the rainforest. It's another thing to listen to people's backyards. We are not interested in the goings on of you or your neighbors. We also hope that you are that as well. So a very important feature of this is that the moment it detects human voices, it'll just throw that entire, it just stops capturing it. So human voices will not be captured at all. We're working on some AI models that'll be able to filter out anthropogenic stuff like sirens, dog barks. A little unfair to call that anthropogenic, but we'll call it that anyway. Car noise, airplanes. So if someone wanted to like have a civilization-free soundscape, they kind of could. But most importantly, we want to make sure that there's no analysis or anything that will be done on stuff that has human voices or activity in it.
I kind of like that idea of filtering out civilization.
Yeah. Well, so there's another feature that I'm still trying to find an audience for. It felt a little funny. We're all used to using our smartphones, but it felt a little silly to me that in order to listen to nature and get into it, you had to use your smartphone. So yes, that's a great interface for it. But the thing also has a little FM transmitter radio, one of the mics. So if you want to if you're one of those people that wants to put your phone in the other room when you go to sleep or whatever, you can then just stream the sounds of your backyard to your clock radio or something and wake up to that. So we're trying to go for a low tech option as well here.
That's all pretty cool. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you could come on. There was something, I don't know if there was something you wanted to show, some of the design.
Oh yeah,
you had
well, I'll throw up a link for a video, I guess, for this as well that you can include. But yeah, I'd say that this is Delta. It's available on the 11th on Kickstarter. We really hope that this is going to be something everyone can get on board with, because it's for you, but it's for everyone can be a part of it. It's important that we are trying to show there is a interest in nature in your backyard, and there's plenty of tools out there to do that. But please join us, because we need that validation, and we need that boost, I'd say, at the beginning.
So it looks like if they go to squibbon.com, there's a link to get an announcement, an alert when it's on Kickstarter.
Exactly. And if you sign up, we'll let you know right when it happens, and we'll keep letting you know over the course of it. But yeah, this can be a whole way to create new media. We'll run the campaign for at least a few weeks. So, and then from there, there's just the rest of history to deal with in terms of trying to get this out there. It feels like a really important moment for us to start I don't know, Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because it feels like this is the most important moment in biodiversity since humans have been on Earth, and probably for the rest of the time that we will be. Not just because of loss, but because of like change and adaptation. So scientists 1,000 years in the future, God willing, will wish that we'd like captured high resolution data beyond our own standard of what we were looking for at the time. Like, what are the questions they will have? And so that's why we kind of went to a ridiculous extent in terms of what we'd like this thing to be able to capture and make available, because we're trying to build a raw data set for the questions that we haven't thought of yet.
I think that's a great idea. It's a sound print of the dawn of the Anthropocene, essentially.
Yeah, and like, you know, what this is the most important 10 years that we have right now, except for maybe the last 10, to capture what's here. We can do our best to protect it, but we also should make sure that we're not losing the ability to observe it in the future.
Yeah, and what's also unique about the moment is, you know, technology and the awareness that has come through science really has created in humans a growing, if deeply incomplete, awareness of the pressures that we're putting on these systems. You know, 50 years ago, we were basically gung-ho, going forward, doing our thing. There was some, you know, National Geographic stories about deforestation and like, but not really to the extent that science has allowed recently in terms of monitoring insect abundance, declines in fisheries, and so this really is a moment. There's a guy named Stuart Hart at Cornell. He was a professor of management who gave a speech once on what he called chronocentrism, that basically every generation feels it's special. You know, World War I, the Great Depression, etc. He said, but this moment really is special in a big way because of the planetary systems that we push in a certain direction. You can't just sort of wind back the clock.
We're also lucky. We're lucky in ways that others will look back and kind of envy us for, to have access to this kind of nature that, you know, regardless of what we do, it will be different in the future. And we have to think about how they can have the right kind of access to it too, because they'll know things that we don't, and they'll ask questions that we don't. We want those questions to be answerable. I feel like sorry, yeah, go ahead, please. I feel like every species on Earth is like, regardless of our ability to communicate or parse what's there, like every species on Earth, or at least groups of them, especially the ecology of a species living together and adapting, there's sorts of genius that are baked in that you can't gather from DNA. You can't gather it from fossils. You might not even be able to gather it from like direct observation. You need these like large data sets to be able to parse it out with you know, big data approaches or machine learning, because the right answers to adaptation are likely understood by at least a few of them out there, or they'll invent them along the way. So if we lose the ability to capture that, it might be something that we can implement at the last minute.
That's
eco-mimicry in a way.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thought. I'm gonna close with here's a pileated woodpecker. You think about woodpeckers as pecking wood and getting grubs and stuff. He was gorging on berries here in Maine I think it was September last year, and you'll hear some calling too. And again, capturing the sonic aspect, like right there, you can hear probably 5 or 6 different bird species in the background.
Absolutely. And then even ones we can't hear. There's stuff going on up top.
Right. There's an insect in there, so all kinds of stuff. So it's great to hear what you're up to, Topher. And I hope people will migrate to squibbon.com, SQUIBBON.com,
Sure.
and learn more.
Thanks
for joining me, and
thank you.
there'll be more to come.